Hi, my name is Mo, and if you don't know me, I'm the host and the interlocutor of this podcast you're listening to called the Monologue Podcast. I'm also an associate professor in the College of Medicine, a scientist, a cancer researcher, and also a mother. My journey to motherhood wasn't easy. It was one paved with tears and doubts. My path was not conventional either, but I'm proud of it. It is what it is. I welcomed my second child last year through surrogacy, and I believe that surrogacy is widely misunderstood, but that needs to change, don't you think? If you're unfamiliar with the term, surrogacy is a method of assisted reproduction where a woman called a surrogate carries and gives birth to a child for someone else, often referred to as the intended parents or communicating parents. Surrogacy is a very personal journey, but I'm sharing this for two reasons. One, because stories matter, representation matters, and also because I want someone out there to know that they are not alone in their struggle, that they shouldn't feel less than because this is a path that is tenable to them. So this month, I'm doing what this podcast does best, having real, honest conversations. In 5 episodes, I sit down with key people in this journey, medical professionals, surrogate mothers, intended parents, and legal experts. Together, we untangle the complex, emotional, and deeply human journey of surrogacy. So whether you're considering surrogacy, navigating infertility, supporting someone on this path, or just want to learn, come along for the ride. Now, enjoy the show. Hello everyone, this is Mo of the Monologue Podcast. For those joining us for the first time, welcome. And for those our followers, for our consistent listeners, welcome back. Today's episode is going to be a heavy one. So for those who might be mentally fragile right now, just a heads up. Some of the things I'll be talking about are very heavy. You probably know why we're here today, to talk about this very complex topic. Now, to set the tone for the conversation, I should mention that as it's my first time talking about this, a lot of what I will share will probably take me by surprise as well, because I haven't quite had the time to sit down to really metabolize everything. I think it's just because of how complex it is, right? I'm going to use that word complex a lot. And so I might shock myself and I might shock you as well. Because I also tend to do this thing where, and I noticed that during my therapy sessions, my therapist, I'm an external metabolizer. Like, I internalize a lot of things, but when I say things, I go like, I take the position of both the person speaking and the person also observing the words coming out of my mouth. So that duality, and I shock myself. So that said, it's also a time for me to process a lot of the emotions that have gone into this process, okay? And for those of you who don't know me, why should you listen to this episode? It's actually going to be a lot useful to people in your lives who might be considering this. And I want to also make this delineation. This is my story, okay? So don't take my episode to go and use as an ammunition against your friends who are trying to conceive, saying, oh, this person did surrogates, you should consider doing it. As a matter of fact, I'm banning you from doing that. Share it open-mindedly, but don't share it as an ammunition, because it's been done to us many times. And frankly enough, people know about surrogacy already, okay? Share it as a way to pass information, but not to make them feel like you're missing out on something if you don't do it this way. I feel very strongly about that. Do not use my episode for evil. And God is watching you, most importantly. And then I should also say that because it's my story, the things that might work for me might not work for you. So if you're considering going down this path, please do it in a very safe way, and also talk to your medical provider and, of course, your partner with it, because these are really big, strong life decisions you're going to make, and they can break relationships. I mean, it's quite heavy. All right. So this is a Monologue Podcast, right? I mentioned that already. We've been doing this podcast for the past 7 years. So if you're not familiar with the way I talk, we're very conversational. Even when we're talking about heavy things like this, we'll still, find ways to make it very conversational. I've shared a lot of episodes about my fertility journey, miscarriages, IVF failures, adoption, fostering. So go catch up on those episodes. And I'm making a note for my assistant to make sure they tag those in the show notes so that we can see where we're coming from. We just didn't jump on surrogacy. We've tried it all. So to those people that always say, have you tried this? Have you tried that? We've tried it all. So I'm a trained pharmacist. So let me drop some of my resume. I'm a trained pharmacist. I hold 2 doctoral degrees, one as a PharmD and one in PhD in pharmacy. So I come with receipts, okay? And I know what I'm talking about. I'm also married to a physician, right? He's not fresh out of medical school. He's been practicing now for a number of years. So, yes, and we did suffer from infertility. I can still say do suffer from infertility, but that has been resolved, by what I'm going to be talking about. And I'm dropping all this receipts. So for those that don't know us to really know what we're talking about. That said, I'm not giving medical advice. Far be it from me. I'm not even giving any form of advice. I do not believe in giving advice. I can share my story and you can pick whatever will be useful for you. So let's dive right into it. So my name is Mo. Born in Nigeria in the 80s. And got married about 14 years ago. I kind of knew there was going to be, my life around having kids was going to be a journey. I kind of knew, I always knew. So I was a child who would tell my mom I was going to adopt as a child. And of course, being Nigerian, she was like, God forbid, no, you have your own kids, you carry your own kids. And I always thought those are two mutually exclusive events. You can adopt and still carry your own kids. Well, anyways, I kind of knew it. Even when I was growing up in church, my heart was always drawn to those who were trying to conceive. Even as a child, I had a special love for those neighbors and aunties. And I remember when I was working in the pharmacies I work with, my senior colleagues, the ones who were trying to conceive, I just always had a special love for them. So I'd always known my journey around childbearing was going to be quite a journey, but I didn't know the scale of it. I just had a suspicion about it. And so fast forward to when we just got married. Before we got married, in 2009, this was 2 years before we got married, I underwent a procedure. Before then, I never underwent any surgery. As a matter of fact, I remember always filling forms when they ask you about your surgical history, but never had any. And from 2009 to 2023, that was the most recent surgery. I can't even count. I think I've exhausted numbers of fingers on my hands. The number of surgeries I've had around, recurring ovarian cysts, fibroids, so many things. And this came with pain. Also endometriosis. So take your pick of the litter. And so fast forward 2 years from there. And, the gist was after I had my laparotomy for the ovarian cystectomy was, try and get married soon, yada, yada, which, I tried. My boyfriend didn't propose right away. And I was like, calm down. It's just ovaries, okay? Calm down. But we got married 2 years later, and 1 year into the marriage, which they define as infertility, consistent sex without pregnancy, you seek your doctor, which we did. I was 20 something. And I'm putting all this timeline so I can share. I'm not going to go into details because I've talked about this ad lib on other episodes. So go catch up on those ones and we'll tag them in the show notes. Which we did, given how proactive we were. It wasn't quite easy because I was in grad school then. Yeah, did I mention that? Yes, I was in grad school. So we went to see the doctor and, the biggest regret there was I let them do that thing where they go, oh, you're still young, you'll be fine. I didn't feel like they were very aggressive with me. And I think that also boils into the culture of medicine. I bet if I was in Nigeria versus being in the US and having more culturally competent providers, I probably would have had better care. I was in Texas, Austin to be specific, where you didn't have they were good at what they did, but I didn't think I had culturally competent care. And that's just saying it the way it is. Now that I know what I know. And so we tried again. I had to go through another surgery while I was in grad school because I was having fluid being built up in my office. What had happened was after my laparotomy, which is where they kind of cut you open like a cesarean section and take out all the cysts. These are like tumors, but then benign tumors. They're not cancer-causing tumors around my ovaries. What had happened was that I started getting scar tissues and fluid started building around my ovaries, which made it very hard for the sperm to go through. So it kind of polarized the environment. So they had to drain it, and they were like, and they put like an anti-adhesive film over it that it was going to dry up, and we could try again and see if that was going to help. It didn't help. So the next step was IVF straight away. Not even like IUI or anything like that. It was IVF. We called our parents, let them know. They sent some coins. This was when Naira dollar was still good. I think I was like 90 to 100 Naira to a dollar then. These were the good old days. Sent some money. We did IVF. I got about, 17 eggs extracted then. And by the time they did all of their subtraction and addition, the ones that were going to give the best yield of embryos with the sperm, we ended up with about 10 embryos or so. Yeah. And I did a first cycle, fresh cycle, they call it, implanted with just one, didn't get pregnant. And then that was very devastating. I remember just crying on the bus. I got the call from the nurse on my way to classes. It was a Friday afternoon. You do that 10-day wait, or 14-day wait, I don't remember. And I remember just bawling in the bus, and people were sitting down beside me. Nobody even came to ask what's wrong with you. Again, I'm just dropping all these nuggets to show you this kind of obodoyinbo living that happens to us sometimes. And I felt like the world was just over then. Felt like a failure, like colossal failure. So we tried again 2 years later, I think. Again, these things weren't cheap. We're paying out of pocket because my insurance didn't cover. I lived in Texas, which was a red state. So for those who are not familiar, we have what we call red states, blue states, and purple states. They're just, geopolitical zonings. Red states tend to be more conservative. They don't believe in helping with fertility, care. So I had good insurance, but it just didn't cover IVF. So a lot of that was paid out of pocket. Imagine paying $10,000 as a grad student. So all of my fellowship money was saved, was scrimped to do all of that. We tried again the next year, got pregnant, yay. And then this was 2014. Got pregnant. It was also the time I was getting my master's. I was still in a PhD program, but I did a master's along the way. And 7-8 weeks into it, I think I was about entering the second trimester or so. I had a miscarriage. It wasn't second trimester. It was 8 weeks, sorry. I was entering the 8 week. I was due for that next ultrasound. I had a miscarriage. It was on the first week of May. And I bled so much, I thought I was going to die. I thought there was no way. And this is coming from someone that has a heavy period. So for me to say I was bleeding, like I was dying. It was a Saturday. And I remember calling the nurse. They give you a number for a nurse to page for an on-call nurse. So I called her and she sounded so chill, like, you know what? You can go to the ER, but you're probably just you're going to pay a lot more for that. I can just tell you that it seems like you've had it fully evacuated. Just, rest and I rest. Like, I'm going crazy over here. Like, it's like, well, the earliest you can come is on a Monday, but you can go to the ER. I'm just telling you what to do. So, yeah, lost the pregnancies and life was never quite the same again. It took me till December to really mourn, cry about that. We tried again, didn't work, tried again, didn't work, with all those frozen embryos. And then in 2018, we decided to put in the last ones. I got pregnant. So yay. And I was in Ireland. I had a miscarriage there. That was just the last time I ever got pregnant. So that was about 7 years ago. So if you don't know me, I'm a type AAA, very driven. I get things done, very efficient. And I'm a bit of a control freak too. I like getting things done. Don't tell me your dreams because I'll make sure you achieve them. So just imagine how everything on the surface looked perfect, but there was just this gaping hole in my life. I have no words to, capture what it's like to be on the journey trying to conceive. So many nights I cried. I remember the very first miscarriage. I cried so much that I think I burst my eardrum. I still have ringing in one of my ears till now. There's a pain that comes with that no one quite understands. Not even your loving spouse or your sacrificial mother. No one quite understands what that is like. And so for so long, it was just like that. So 2018 was the last IVF experiment. I did go through what you call a mock cycle because I moved from Texas to Oklahoma, and I did find a fertility center with a doctor that was, it seemed to border on culturally sensitive, not competent, but sensitive care. Like he kind of knew what he was doing, and he had a suspicion that my receptivity to progesterone might be responsible for my pregnancy losses. So I was going to do a mock cycle to kind of see how much progesterone I would need to support the pregnancy before we did another one. So we tried that. That didn't work at all. This was smack dab in the middle of COVID. And to show you how far my mind had gone since then, after I got the call from the nurse's office, I just went into the fridge, got my wine glass and my wine cubes and poured me a glass of red wine, and I crossed my leg and I drank it. I was like, if I'm not pregnant, at least I can have wine now. And that was that, right? before then, I had talked about fostering / adopting, and my husband wasn't into it, and I didn't want to force that. But fast forward 4 years into that, he said, okay, let's begin that process again. So we began fostering, and we fostered about a couple of kids, but eventually we were able to adopt one of them, who's our current, our first child now, Ariifeoluwa, Sibyl, one of the loves of my life. And adoption is different. It's still grief in a way. But the ability to love somebody that you weren't programmed to love biologically really, really, stumbled me in a way, because I didn't think that was going to be feasible for me. But that was my very first path to motherhood. And it was okay for me, it was okay for me. But for one reason or the other, my husband still wanted to, try. So, which also brings me to this very first episode in this series. So welcome to Sùúrùgate. And I put all of that preamble to really build the information behind the story. Sùúrùgate, which is a special series where I take you through our journey of surrogacy as a Nigerian-born American. Surrogacy is a topic that I think is wrapped in layers of cultural, legal, and emotional complexity. And for many of us in African communities, it's not often discussed openly. But that's about to change. In this 5-part series, I'll be sharing my first-hand experience, the highs and lows, and the lessons learned along the way. You'll be hearing from a lot of experts, the legal, the medical side of things. And hopefully we're also trying to get a surrogate on the podcast to talk about their own experience and why they serve their surrogates to commissioning parents. So now, why do we call it Sùúrùgate? Well, it's a plain words, combining surrogacy with sùúrù. Sùúrù is Yoruba word for patience. And let me tell you, this journey required a lot of it. Oodles and oodles of patience, waiting, trusting the process, dealing with the unexpected challenges, and holding on to hope. So Sùúrùgate is not a story about surrogacy. It's not just a story about surrogacy. It's about endurance. It's about faith and navigating the pathway to parenthood in a way many people don't talk about. So in today's episode, the very first of this series, I'll take you back to where it all started. The decision. Why did we choose surrogacy? Why did we decide to go back to Nigeria for it? And what were the expectations versus reality? It's a deeply personal episode, and I hope that by sharing my story, it opens up a much-needed conversation around surrogacy in African and diasporan communities. So let's get into it. So I've talked to you about just our IVF journey, adoption, fostering. And then 2021 came. This was a year before we finalized the adoption of our daughter. She was a foster. So foster is like, you haven't adopted them, you're just temporary parents. And the US has a system they have in place, We decided to try surrogacy. And so we compared the cost between Nigeria and the US. I mean, Nigeria was accessible to us because we're from there. He trained as a medical doctor in Nigeria, I trained as a pharmacist. And so we are very aware about the medical landscape of that. And we also have our pharmacist there. So it wasn't it was a no-brainer to kind of do that comparison. The reason we also chose Nigeria was it was cheaper, a lot cheaper. So in the US, you're looking at between $250,000 to about $500,000, depending on the complexities around, all of that. And so what we did was we tapped into our network of medical professionals to kind of narrow down to doctors and hospitals who were legit and who were, had the results, they were result oriented, but also a team could work with, given that we're not going to be in Nigeria with all of this. So it's very, very important that the people knew us and knew about our story. So what that entailed was that we narrowed it down to about 5 doctors. And I did that thing of sharing them my medical history. The reason we decided to go with the doctor we went with was a couple of reasons. He came highly recommended by one of our very close friends. So shout out to Basalami, a nurse. And she had worked with him in some capacity and spoke highly of his ethics and just that he was very result-oriented. And also, I remember when I was talking to him, it was about the only doctor that I felt like he had read through my history. Like, he actually read through everything I sent to him. Because for the first time I was hearing that all the surgeries, remember I told you about the number of surgeries I had that, I'm exhausting two hands, right? He made it known to me that all the surgeries I had done around my ovaries, every time I'll have I was just going in and out of surgery. If I were to shoot for you, which I won't want to do, I have a lot of holes, from those robotic laparoscopies they would do to drain the cyst around my ovaries to kind of relieve the pressure, relieve the pain due to endometriosis and ovarian cyst. And he said, did anybody talk to you about freezing more eggs before you were doing all the surgeries? I was like, no. So my AMH level, which is my anti-Mullerian hormone, which is a proxy for just your egg quality. So the moment a child is born, they'll have the most number, a female child, they'll have the most number of eggs they'll have in their lifetime. So I hate to use example. Arife has the most number of eggs she'll ever have in her lifetime. And the older she gets, she's losing, some of that. But it's also age dependent. So you look at your age group, between your 30s and 40s, you should have this number of eggs. My levels were that of a 60-something-year-old woman. And because of the hormonal changes and also because of the surgeries. So every time they would scrape and, save my, my life from all of the effect of ovarian cyst, it was affecting the quality of my eggs because my ovarian lining was, being, almost like being shed away. And no one ever told me that to freeze my eggs. So I pause here to say, please, if you are kind of like me, if my story mirrors yours, have that conversation with your doctor about whether you need to freeze your eggs or not. I'm not going to outrightly say, go freeze your eggs. Again, I'm not giving medical advice. This is not a medical podcast. I do not have the degrees for that. Enough degrees for that, sorry. So, and again, with the history of endometriosis, stage 4 endometriosis with ovarian cyst, and just recurring pregnancy losses, it became expedient to outsource that process, right? So, it wasn't something we jumped into lightly. It was a long road of contemplation, research, and deep emotional processing. So it took about 2 years from that first conversation with your doctor to really say, okay, let's get into it. And so the question would be, when did it become a serious consideration? I'll say for a long time, I believed that if I just kept trying, I'll be able to carry my own child, to term. Like many women facing fertility challenges, I really clung to that hope. But after a lot of attempts, and sincerely, I realized that you just have to be very real with yourself. Because every time, I also ended up getting a gynecologist just for my gynecological issue. I didn't have that. So again, I pause here to say, if you're trying to conceive, there's so much pressure on, getting a reproductive endocrinologist. You need to have primary care provider as well. That can be a primary care doctor, a family physician, or internal medicine, or a gynecologist. I did not have that. My gynecologist let it known to me that you have to choose one at a time, because everything you're doing so I will have flares from endometriosis, and to stop my flares, whatever they'll put me on will prevent me from getting pregnant. So like birth control pills, or the time they put me on Lupron, and which is like Luprolide, that made me go crazy. I had menopausal symptoms, dry bones. I was dry everywhere. Like my bones would ache, and that would kind of put a freeze on your ovaries from releasing eggs. So it's like, if I decide to pause that process and try to, get pregnant, I was putting my life at risk, because endometriosis is no joke. It hurts a lot. So she was like, you need to choose what is priority for you every time you're thinking about that, because whatever you're doing to stop your endometriosis is going to prevent you from getting pregnant. So again, make sure you establish those points of care for women like me. You need a primary care provider that knows your history and can carry you through that journey. So, surrogates, right? Now, as we dug deeper, we realized that it was going to be a viable and meaningful option for us. We had considered adoption. As you know, I talked about my daughter, who we came to adoption, right? And so that was just why it became something we wanted to do. And I wasn't 100% comfortable with the idea of doing it in Nigeria, because the more I talked about it, the more I did my research about it, I realized that there were some human rights issues at stake, especially with the surrogates. my mouth was left agape by the time I was done talking to the doctor, because we had to, after we did the virtual consultations, we made our way to Nigeria that year to visit his clinic and just sit down and just talk about, okay, what does this entail? What are the timelines? Let's establish some, expectations. And he was very frank with me. He said, let me be very, very frank with you. There are no strong laws that support the right of surrogates in Nigeria. And unfortunately, the model they use is not quite robust. And the way I can describe it is, that model, house help model, is how they do it. There's an agency or agent that serves as the middleman between the clinic and the surrogates. The agent gets the money, and if they are very nice, they will disperse quite a chunk of it. Some of them don't. They just toss pennies to the surrogates. So imagine someone going through that pain of carrying your child, not eating well, not having proper accommodation. Tell me, in what kind of environment? If you think about the latent phase theory, where in neutral, like stress can be transferred from the mother, anyone carrying the child, I call that mother because that person's the mother, to the child. That messed up with me. I was like, I can't in good conscience, be a part of this problem. I cannot. So I had a lot of questions. He was like, sadly, that's how it's being done here, and he's not going to lie to me. So that's why it took me 2 years to come back to that whole position again. What do we do, and how do we circumvent this whole issue, which I'll talk about in subsequent episode, because we did make some changes to our surrogate, how we did our surrogacy. So the first emotion that came with considering surrogacy was more of just resignation. I felt like a failure, really, because it's like you can't even do this much by yourself, right? But there was also some protective factors in fostering my daughter and eventually adopting her. I had to be in therapy for that. Heck, I'm still in therapy. But knowing that motherhood, the path, and I thank God for her, because if I can bond with a child that doesn't share a trace of her, although people say she looks like me and behaves like me, which I'm like, no, she's she's a far better person than I am. If I can bond with a child, I love her so much, I would literally live my life. I love my husband, but some things I can't do for my husband, I can do for my child. I would lay down my life for her in a heart. I don't even ask. I would do it. You want my liver? Take it. You want half of my brain? Take it. And this is somebody that didn't go through my stomach, just went through my heart. How much more a child that, you're going through this process for? So that for me was like, okay, maybe it's part of your story. You can always call it as one of your 4 facts, right? But there were a lot of questions I had, which should be normal, right? And then in many African cultures, there's an expectation that you should be not carrying a child yourself, right? That blood connection. And so it's okay to say that surrogacy is often misunderstood or viewed with skepticism, and this made our decision even more complex. But we know that we had to focus on what was best for us, because if anything, we've never walked the normal path, But we told our family members, and I'm sure by now they're just like, these people will just do what they want to do. They've been very supportive with the adoption, so it was a no-brainer. They were just like, whatever works for you, we'll support you anyhow. So the first people we told were our immediate family. They were very supportive. I didn't have anyone that was dismissive, but I understand that some might be dismissive. And if that happens to you, again, it could be their way of just how they understand the world. So do what works best for you. Not everyone will be on board. We didn't have any problem with that. And they're even within the medical system, and I'll talk about them in another episode. So yeah, I'll save that for later. But yeah. So again, you have to be very prepared for just so many things that will come your way. So here's how it works. When we decided to go, we signed MOU with the clinic, and we chose that clinic in addition to the doctor that we're going to be working with. They offered the totality of the package, so legal work, which you need to establish beforehand. They're also going to help us find the surrogate, the agency to work with. So all of that was just taken out of our hands. We just had to pay for that, and they were going to do all of that. And we also used that time to collect the samples they needed, for the embryos and all. And I'll say, yeah, like, so you're looking at cost, you're looking at legal considerations and cultural familiarity. Those are 3 things that made us choose Nigeria. Now, find those trustworthy clinics and be very extra cautious about legitimacy and ethics. It might not be applicable to everyone. Some of you might just want to get your babies and just, go home. If that's you, you can skip this part of the episode. For people that want to do things right, it's very, very important that you establish that there's no way you're going to get... I want to sleep well at night. I want to know that I'm not part of a problem. That even though the law isn't there, doesn't mean that I should just do things in a very slobby way. I want to make sure that when history is being told, I did right by everyone that came past, like whose path came out, whose path, crossed mine, right? So I would always talk about the surrogates because they've given me the greatest gifts I couldn't give myself. Not even for all the money in the world. I couldn't do this myself. So a surrogate to me is like an egg, like a precious egg that I'll always talk about in the best of lights because they laid their life literally down to give me something that I could never give myself. So you will never hear me bash surrogates here. Whatever their motivations for doing it, that's a different story. But I would never talk down on surrogates or look at them as less than, right? And then another layer of why you want to do things right, if you're like me, so being American citizens and having a child abroad. So as you know, the US confers citizenship 2 ways, justly, which is on US soil. So any child born in US soil is automatically a citizen for the most part, if the current administration doesn't change that. And then just sanguinis, I think, which is by blood. So basically, if one parent was a citizen at the time of the child's birth, during some determination, because we're not born in US soil, you have to notify the nearest embassy and they make that determination. So we had to go through that. And they want to see all of your paperwork. When did you start thinking about surrogacy? All the paperwork you signed. I cannot talk about the importance of keeping those paperwork. I have a folder on my computer that had all the paperwork, the timelines, when was the sample collected. They want to see how that matches your passport. So keep your passport. So I've had a name change. And because I travel a lot, I go through passports, notebooks. Keep all of that. They want to see all those timelines, all those stories. So I'm sharing all those tips now because they're going to be very, very useful for you. And the conversation with the clinics. Why did you choose this clinic? Why Nigeria? Why surrogacy? Did you know the surrogates? What agreements were in place? Yada, yada. So all those things are very, very important. So we started the process in 2003. The hospital found us a surrogate. They started, implanted 2 embryos, and we got pregnant. Yay! And I won't lie to you, when I heard they were twins, I was super scared. Like, the fear that gripped me, it was insane. For someone who's been trying to conceive, and all of a sudden you're afraid of babies, it's like anti-pick a struggle. Like, you cannot be saying you want kids and then you're having twins and the anxiety. So we also, the clinic we worked with, they had a WhatsApp group chat with, we assigned a nurse who was like our point of care with the surrogate, They'll provide the antenatal visits, how the surrogate is doing. And another thing I'll give credit to this doctor was, in talking to him about the ethical issues surrounding surrogates in Nigeria, he was like, what if you did it this way? Because you had a lot of concerns that are valid. In addition to whatever you're paying the agents, and they might not pass a huge chunk to the surrogate, how about sending extra, I think it was 50,000 naira, which was not a lot. I would have done more, which we ended up doing more anyways. And that money goes directly to the surrogates. We won't pay them directly, but would, get them food stuff, making sure that, they were doing very well. And my nurse can help you with that. I was like, that's fine. So we did that. And so, I remember one morning I woke up around 3 a.m. This was sometime in August. And this was like 14 weeks into the pregnancy. So, she was doing quite well. And I was like, let me just download this baby center app. Let me get involved. So this is another way you can prepare yourself. Given that I was yet to never went through the whole range of pregnancy symptoms and all that. The farthest I ever made it was at 8 weeks. So 14 weeks, I was like, oh, pretty far gone. This is good. We're almost there, almost at the halfway mark, right? Almost. Let me download the Baby Center app and see what it's like. It tells you, oh, your baby is the shape of a cantaloupe or whatever fruit they're always using. I kid you not, that very day, I woke up around 3 a.m., which is unusual for me. And by the time I woke up, I downloaded the app, I read through it, I was like, okay. That same day, we lost the pregnancy. I thought there was no other way to mourn or grieve, be in grief. I can't put into words how painful that experience was. It was so compounded. So what had happened was, and I'm being open about this because there's so many lessons to learn, and I don't want you doing yours and going through the same thing and knowing that you could have learned earlier on. It's a costly mistake that should never have happened. So because our contact with the surrogate was through the nurse, who was just doing it for us, but that wasn't their duty, because by the time you're done with the surrogate is pregnant, they are transferred out to an antenatal clinic, which is separate from the fertility clinic, right? Because to do fertility services and antenatal services, it's a whole lot. Not many clinics can handle that. So they had, transitioned out to this hospital in Ogudu, Nigeria, Lagos, and Ojodo or wherever. I think Ojodo, Ogudu maybe. Sorry, Ogudu. And they were supposed to go in for that scan, a week before or so. They got that sonographer wasn't around. And so she was told to go and then she should come back again. So between that time and when they finally went back, something had happened that wasn't cut. And we lost, so it was fetus A and B. So they could confirm that fetus, was it B? One of them had passed away. And I laugh now, but it's just like a trauma response. And so it was almost like, okay, if his one is gone, at least we have the second one. It was like a cruel joke. And then they were like, so they were doing the HSG, which is the urine test that has the hormone, HSG, pregnancy hormone. And with twins, it's accelerated. You go from 300 to 30,000, within a month or so. The value was just going down and down. But it hadn't gone to the point where you could say there was no pregnancy. There was still some little bit of hope. Anyways, lots of pregnancies. So remember, it was also that same day I downloaded that Baby Center app, right? Because I refused to be part of the process. Not like I refused to be part of it. I was doing more like I was doing it for a client. That's how I really tend to do things, that I go into auto mode because I get things done, right? So I don't take it this is something I'm doing for myself. I'm just doing it for somebody that I care about. But it was my first time being involved in the process because I downloaded that app to follow along with the surrogate and see what it's like. Oh, these are symptoms. Oh, the baby's head is forming. The lungs, all that kind of stuff. And I was like, the same day, are you kidding me? Did I jinx it? Did I jinx it? And of course, the devil wants to play a lot of tricks on you. And I just thought, yeah, I brought my bad juju into this and I jinxed it. And for the longest time, I couldn't even tell my husband about this part. That it was me. It was my bad karma. I don't know. I don't have any bad karma. I haven't wronged anybody in my life that will be out to get me like this. I hope. Right? Okay. So, yeah. So, and of course you heard things like, maybe the surrogates, did something intentionally to lose the pregnant. Calm down. One. No. I refuse to hold on to that line of thought. Because it's not even in their best interest to do that. Number one, they will no longer be useful to that agency. And I've already established that, okay, I didn't talk about this part. People that are doing surrogates in Nigeria, the surrogates, it's a classism, there's a social class in the sense of the well-to-dos and the not so well-to-dos. There's a gap. So you see a lot of surrogates, they have low educational levels. Not all of them. But that leaves a lot of room for exploitation, which we have to address, and a lot of them don't even know what they're getting into, that they might die in the process, or they might develop sepsis, or even lose their own ability to have their own kids in the future. Now, most surrogates, they want you to have had a child before you do surrogacy. So tell me why anybody in their sane mind want to go through that process and then end up jeopardizing that, lifeline for themselves. So I refuse to believe that this person did anything intentionally to harm the babies. In my grief, which was worse than the grief I've had from my own personal loss, like mourning the grief of my own pregnancy losses, this was far more complex and far more perfect. I can't even put into words the process, what it was like for me. I wrote her a letter and I sent it to the nurse and let her know, I thank you for what you've done so far. I don't blame you in any bit. As a matter of fact, I honor you for this thing you've done, and I feel so bad that you have to go through this whole experience by yourself. So my heart goes out to you, and I'll keep praying for you. I still remember her name. I just can't mention her name. And I let her know that I don't blame her at all. I remember that at 14 weeks, this is like almost fully formed, right? So she had to go through a DNC, which is a procedure in itself. So, talk about trauma. And then we sent her a little bit of money. So I was like, you know what? People talk about surrogacy. That was our very first experience. We lost our twins at 14 weeks. January 2024. Scientists were to experiment again. And this time around, the clinic, they were very sorry. And for me to say I wanted to use them again, this same antenatal clinic, we ended up using them again. And it came down to, so we had to find another surrogate. And where she was living at that time was actually going to be quite good for her to be in. So what changed between the first and second one? A lot of things. One, I reached out to my friend Tammy. So shout out to Tammy Oshawa. Tammy was the reason I started this podcast, by the way. So she's one of the most influential people in my life. And she was like, I'm going to introduce you to Busola. I knew Busola. Busola and I went to, Busola, Tammy, and myself, we went to Idiaraba together. Look, they studied nursing, I studied pharmacy, but we're in the same circle. It's like, talk to Busola to help you out. So I talked to Busola. Busola was like, how about we do it this way? This time around, let's try this. Why not pay for the service of a midwife to serve as your liaison between the surrogate and yourself? She will know about the midwife will go and see her, take her, establish that point of care. So that way the nurses that was doing it for us, that'll be taken out of her. But this person will pay for her services. She'll call on the surrogate, check on the surrogate, befriend her, be like her paddy. And we should all set up a WhatsApp group, which we did. So April of 2024, we set up a WhatsApp group with myself, Busola, Chidima, who was the midwife, and then my husband. So 4 of us in that group. And Busola, me, what a sweet soul. I said that to say that I know this is quite a difficult thing to do, but you can't do this alone. You need to cry out for help. You cannot do this alone. I don't know who you are. I don't care how much money you have. You cannot do this alone. It took speaking out about what I was going through for me to find kind of help. And I get things done. Even my capacity, you need a village. You need people to surround you. People that will take your battle for you. Busola went to war for me. Busola, me, she would call me. How are you doing mentally? Tell me, what's going on in your head? What are you thinking about this process? The questions she would ask me, it was as if I should be asking myself those questions, but I couldn't ask myself because I was so much in grief, and the fear that had gripped me from all my past experiences and this one that didn't work out. It's like, she really says she tried surrogacy. You tried it and you're not getting the result. Like, maybe something is off with you. But Sarah would tell me, don't think like that. Don't think like that. It's going to work. It's going to work. So I want to encourage anyone listening to this. It's okay to have those fears, but you can't let them hold you back. You have to be firm. You have to, approach it thoughtfully, prayerfully, if you're into that kind of thing, which we are. And have your people that will go to war for you hold you tight. So what Chidima would do was, we paid for her services. She went to meet the surrogates, told them about us. Surrogate doesn't know who we are. And so there are different types of surrogacy. For us, it was very important that we do things right, not trying to get rid of our pain point at the expense of somebody's life, right? So what Chidima would do was, we got to know a lot about the surrogate, beyond her just, what was her reason for doing this, but what's her family like? Does she have kids? Is she married? She had kids. So we knew about her kids. What does she do? What would be the most helpful? How can we support her? And I should say that this was a very wise decision for us to have done it. Because you living abroad, you don't know a lot about what's going on in Nigeria. And I'll be frank about this, you might be at risk of being exploited when you want to do things the right way. So it's very, very important that whatever I was thinking of as, can we do this for these surrogates? Let me call her Jane, which is not her name, by the way. If we wanted to do this for Jane, what do you think about it? We're like, oh, don't do it that way. How about we do this other way? And their suggestion, Bosolami and Chidima's suggestions will end up even, yielding better results than my original idea. Even though I had the right intentions, but the execution of it, coming from my diasporan thinking, wasn't going to be very, it wasn't going to be a good fit for the way things were done in Nigeria. And I didn't want to set like a very bad precedence. Like I was just throwing money at the problem. So that was one of the reasons why it's very good to have a liaison. And of course, because I'm using a professional, I needed to pay for her time. So it wasn't a lot of money to pay for Chidima's time. But she would take the surrogate to all of her appointments. Got to know her, would check in on her. We put her on premium meds for the antenatal clinic. And I'm listing all the steps, not to show just how, nice and good we are, because these are things you can do to support your surrogates, depending when we have better laws in place. Because remember, these are people that are mostly not very educated. They need the money. They are very desperate already. And I hate that I'm saying this way, but that's just the reality of things. So how can you, with the means and with the desperation, how can you further not cause harm to these people? These are the things we did. And I hope that people can do better, because there's so many things we could have done. Again, knowing now what I know, there's some things we could have done better, And we paid for antenatal, everything was paid for, but we paid for drugs, like, only the cheap kind. As a pharmacist, I knew where to source, like, the original, authentic brands to use, even post-pregnancy. Because again, once she's done with the babies, she might be having, milk formation and all that. How do you do all of that? Won't care because she's going through cesarean section. One big thing that we did was therapy. Paid for sessions. During pregnancy, after pregnancy, she still had one done last week. So again, having that in place to really help her, be good. That's some things we did. We paid for accommodation. So the way things are done in Nigeria is you have to pay 2 years upfront. So we supported that heavily. So that way she didn't have to worry about that. We also wanted her to be financially independent. So that way she wouldn't see surrogacy as something she has to keep on doing. Because believe it or not, even though they have a money they cash out at the end of the day, by the time they are done, like a month after, most of them have spent that money because it's not a lot. It's not like they're rolling in dollars. It's not a lot for the things they've gone through. So we wanted her to be financially stable. So that involves coming up with a business plan, something that could thrive. She could, that could help her, feed her family and gain, financial independence. So that's some of the things we did for our surrogates. Again, I'm sharing this not because I'm trying to, blow our horns. Maybe it was my way of just getting rid of the guilt I feel that I'm capitalizing on somebody's weakness to get my own results. And I can still admit to that fact that, yes, that was us capitalizing on a weakness in the system. That said, we wanted to also make sure that she was getting something above and beyond what the agency was paying her. And trust me, and we also sent, in addition to everything, we sent additional money every month for her. While she was in the hospital, we, we ordered food. Like, it wasn't a big deal. When I was coming to Nigeria, from the US to Nigeria, got her, some things. And for her kids, I got to know about, the ages of the kids, a bag full of stuff, like things they could need for school. And just, wasn't a big deal. Just doing all those things to let her know, hey, and I wrote her a letter. Like, I honor you. You will always be part of our story. You don't know who we are, but we know of her. I know who she is. I know of her, right? And so that was just our surrogacy experience. And November, we had a boy. And it was hard. The hardest part for me was just connecting. Because up until that point, it was just a lot going on in my head. And I was also going to Nigeria with my older daughter, and everyone was going to be there. I was happy about the whole thing. It was something joyous. Just don't get me wrong. I mean, his name even has joy in it. And it was Dot's name because, you know how I say, my parents named me after money because I think that they needed money, even though they say it's not money's wealth, whatever, potato. He was named Joy because I realized that it was something I needed. The way my daughter was named after love, because, you see how you have to just think about how God loves us, So it took a while to feel that joy. Heck, I had to borrow stuff from my daughter because she had like the purest expression. Her reaction, we kind of talked to her about it. Maybe I should even do a separate episode on talking to your 5-year-old about a baby brother was coming, but mommy didn't have a bump. But she was still setting up crib and buying stuff and talking about baby. And she was like, Mom, when is the baby coming? When is the baby coming? When is the baby coming? So we had to explain. And good luck trying to explain to a 5-year-old. So when we went to the hospital to go get him, oh my gosh, the look on her face. That's my brother. And then my nephew had whipped out his phone to take a video. He was like, don't take a video of my brother. The way she just is into that role. I looked at her, I was like, wow, I want to be that way, childlike. So it took a while. And I say that to say that it wasn't because I wasn't happy. Again, maybe because of the experience that I've gone through. And it dawned on me that in all of my years of praying to God for a miracle, one thing I forgot to ask God was, when that miracle comes, let me be able to sit in joy. I didn't have it. My heart had been so calloused. I'd grown hard. How the Bible says in Ezekiel 36, taking a heart of stone and giving a heart of flesh. I needed that. There was nothing there anymore. It's been almost 14 years of waiting. There was nothing. I mean, my head could connect to the fact that this is your son, but it's is it truly? Where's the joy? There's nothing there. It took a while. And I felt badly about it. But then I had to tell myself, this is my story. And I talk about this now, not as a way to shame myself, but just to explain to you that was what happened to me. It took a while. But slowly just seeing him smile and being involved I had my mom and my mother-in-law in the house with me. So good luck trying to get a time in. But no, they were very, very helpful. Bathing him, which I did a few times because my mom and my mother-in-law, they were always on top of things. Feeding him, burping him, holding him, singing to him, knowing a little bit about his personality. That has been ways to kind of get that. And then he would smile, or he would, follow you through the room. He's recognizing voices now. So yeah, I'm going to stop here for now. But in the next episode that I would do as a monologue, I'd like to talk about preparing for the interview process. So again, I talked about the US citizen pathway, right? We're US citizens now. How do you get your child from Nigeria to the US? That's a lot. There is a lot that goes into that process. So I'll talk about that in the next episode. But because I have talked a lot on this, I'm going to pause for now. I just want to say that it's a process that will change you. Adjusting to life post-surrogacy has really been a lot of emotional shifts, societal reactions. Oh, good God. Now, we're in Nigeria for 2 months, which again brings me back to, people say, oh, you moved to, I didn't move back to Nigeria. So here's why I had to go back to Nigeria, because of the baby. I'm trying to get his passport so he could fly back with us. So, suspense over, right? So while we're in Nigeria, we had taken for his, vaccinations and then circumcision and all that. Which we believe in. Vaccinations we believe in and circumcision we believe in. And he's a good eater. We got him on. I wasn't going to breastfeed. I didn't want to breastfeed. Now, if you want to breastfeed, there are a lot of options available to you, and they have drugs and procedures for that. I just don't want to do any of that. My personal choice. But then when we take him to the clinic and they would weigh him, like, oh my gosh, he's such a healthy boy. Like, is he on breast? I'm like, no, formula. Why are you not breastfeeding? I'm like, and this is our nurses asking. I'm like, cause like you should, and then almost like shaming you for using formula. I'm like, please, I will refuse to be shamed. People that give birth through CS or labor, you guys, or natural delivery. I'm not even saying natural because I like natural delivery. CS or vaginal delivery, you guys will shame them. Now, shaming me for formula feeding my child rather than, breastfeeding. Do you know that not everybody can breastfeed, even if they try, So, anyways, you have to become patient and more understanding and of yourself, and knowing that not even this whole choice is not everyone that can, be in support of it. And yeah, so again, this is just the beginning of our story. In the next episode, we hope to dive into just more of the logistics, the surprises. And before I go, I just want to say that remember that surrogacy or surrogacy in this part, you need to be very patient, and every journey to parenthood is different, and there's no one right way, right? Whatever your path that is in front of you, that's your path. You don't have to explain why. But I strongly believe that there's always grace available to us once you accepted that this is my journey. And so that's my prayer for you listening. Now, if there are other things you'd like for me to talk about in particular, please let me know in the comment section. But I hope to see you in the next episode. Till then, please be safe and take care of yourselves. And for those joining us for the first time, I hope this was worth your time. Bye. Oh yeah, follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the podcast episode on major platforms, and we'll link all those other episodes on fertility. And of course on our website, www.mosibyl.com.